I want to talk to you about something so important: realism in six-scale sculpting. No, seriously. Okay. Um, I got some questions the other day from a friend of mine who's just starting out in sculpting. And we got discussing some of the differences and how he can make the sculptures a little bit more realistic. So when I first started off, what I had to go off of were Hasbro sculptures, and Hasbro tended to be very, very doll-like. If you check this out, this is an Anakin Skywalker from the Ultimate Darth Vader kit that came out in 2005. It looks like a very doll-like Ryan Reynolds. Okay, when Sideshow acquired the license, they went a little bit more realistic, but it still didn't really capture much of Hayden Christensen's appearance. So then, come to modern day, when you get like a Hot Toys version of this, you can see the level of detail that goes into here and how much better the overall quality is. So I'm going to go over some of the things that helped me go from my own work, something is like this was kind of very crude, not a whole lot of detail, into this, which ended up being the same person but much more realistic. So I caught some of the detail in it. So bear with me a second and we will switch cameras and I'll show you some of the things that helped me improve as I started off. Okay, so here we're looking at a Hasbro sculpture of Anakin Skywalker. Okay, this came out in 2005 as part of the Darth Vader Ultimate Collection set. I've seen some repaints of this that actually make it look pretty decent, but you can tell by the work on this, it looks very doll-like, very toy-like. There's not a whole lot of detail in the hair. It's very crude. A lot of that has to do with the injection process of the vinyl. You lose a lot of detail with that. But actually, it's really not that bad considering it's a mass-produced toy. When Sideshow got the license, they made some changes. Like, this is a much more realistic-looking sculpture, but it still doesn't really capture Anakin Skywalker or Hayden Christensen. Now, when you look here at the Hot Toys version, you can really see a lot of the detail that makes this really look like an actual human being's face. Whereas these can capture a passing likeness, this really can challenge people. If you see a photograph of this, they can actually be a little have a hard time recognizing whether or not it's an action figure or an actual human. Okay, so we're going to put this aside. We're going to look at this guy for now, because this is what we're going to work off of as a base. The first thing that you want to do is you want to go off of your measurements, okay? I recommend getting yourself a set of calipers like this. It's digital. I have this set for millimeters because that's going to give me the smallest and most precise number that I can get. And the first thing I want to do is I want to measure out the head. Now, what you'll notice with these early heads, they tended to be much too large. See, here we are at like 43 millimeters tall. This should actually be about 39 to 38 to be in proper scale. So first, we're starting off with an overscaled sculpture, okay? Then what you want to do is you want to consider what kind of sculpture you're going to do. Are you going to have one with a neck, or are you going to have one without a neck that attaches to a pre-existing neck? That depends on what you want to do with your figure. If you want the head mobility, it's going to move from side to side, you do not want a sculpted neck. If you're going to go for things with a more museum-type pose where it's just going to be pretty much stationary, then a sculpted neck is fine. It can actually make it look a little bit more realistic. Okay, so we're going to start off with this to just work to this level here of a basic sculpture. But again, your measurements are very, very important. Okay, you want to check so you can shape your clay your ball of clay into something that is the same size as this. So you want to work that in. And what I tend to do is I usually, even if I'm going to put a neck on the head sculpt, what I'll do is I'll sculpt just this part here without the neck first, and then later I will add a neck to it, because this way I don't have to worry about accidentally hitting it and knocking things out of position, or grabbing it up here and losing some of the detail I worked out on with the head sculpt as it is. So if you check this out, like you want to measure the profile, you want to measure the height. Then what I do is I'll set my camera up so that I have an image of that, and I will use the adjustments on my screen and my calipers to set this up so I'm looking at a sculpture or a source photo on my computer that is the same size as the sculpture I wanted. That's going to help to give me some detail. Now, the thing that you want to keep in mind as you're doing this is that the eye is the measure of, or the unit of measurement in the head sculpt. So when we look at this, the eye is about almost 7 millimeters wide. Now this is uniform, okay, so you'll notice that in between each eye, from the corner of each eye, is another eye length. So that goes there, and then of course you go over here, there's another almost 7 millimeters on that side. So this will help you to place where you're starting. Okay, now we're going to take some clay here so you can just get a general idea about how to start marking your positions. Okay, so you'll start off with a basic piece of clay. Now I haven't kneaded this in advance, so that it's going to be a little too difficult to work with, but I'm going to ask you to bear with me with a little bit of imagination as you see this. Okay, so now I get to here. First thing I want to do is zero out my calipers, and I want to set this to where I want it. Now, you'll notice on the Hot Toys sculpt, look, this is right there at about 38 millimeters high, and a little bit more with the top of the hair because he does have like some kind of poofy hair going on. But you'll see the actual sculpt here. Look at the difference in the width. Okay, so this here, like at the cheekbones here on the face, you notice it's wider back here. Let me see, get down here. I get on screen, that would actually help. So you get down here, look, it's actually wider than it is up here where I want to be working at, because the face does get an angle. It kind of like has a little bit of a triangle shape to it in the front, obviously. But on here, look, this is actually big for a Hasbro head. So what they did here, they made this face way too narrow, and on the sideshow version, they made the face way too wide. Okay, so you start with your clay, and you want to get this set up to the point that you want it here, so about 38 millimeters. Then you have to keep in mind that the eyes, as you're looking at something, your eyes will deceive you. Your eyes will play tricks on you. Sorry, I didn't mean to channel my inner Obi-Wan there with as I'm talking about Star Wars figures. But your eye will make you think that the eyes are actually up. See this here, if we go here, this is 42 millimeters. And we take this down here like this to where the eyes are. See? Right there at 19 millimeters. Now, if I look at this, it appears that the eyes are at the top third of the head. They're not directly in the center. But in reality, the eyes are directly in the middle of the head. So you want to mark your clay. If I go to 38 millimeters here, that means I want to go to 19 millimeters, right about there. And I want to mark it right here, hold my calipers here, and just kind of press that in. That gives me this line that I'm going to go off of. Now what I'll do is I'll figure out where the nose would fall in here, because that's going to be directly in the center, unless like your face has been bashed in like mine has, and you know your nose is crooked. But the nose will be in the center. And what you want to do is what I do is I set my image up on the screen, and I will measure the width of the eye. So let's just say, for example, that this is about 6 millimeters wide. I will take this and I'll place this here this way. This will give me the inner corners of my eye. Then from there, I'll go this way and I'll mark it here. So this is the distance of your eye. So right in the center there, I'll put a little mark and just kind of eyeball it here. It's going to be about the same. Right there, see? It's pretty much right there. It's in the center. A pretty good eye for that. But boom, okay. So this will give you an idea. Now, what I'll do from here is I will take a longer tool and I will push this eye all the way in. So as I cut away, I will still be able to see where that's going to be. Because what I want to do is I want to work this into a basic shape. So I'll start to carve in some of the basic impressions in here, kind of cutting out the nose. Sometimes I'll add the nose a little bit later, or flesh out the nose a little bit later. But I want to get this line here as it comes in, as it goes in here for the brow line, it comes out on the cheekbone. I want to carve that into the clay before I start. So I'll start off and I will cut into here. I'll take like the X-Acto knife here, and I will cut into this way, just to give myself a basic shape. Now, sometimes what you want to do, if you're looking at this, you may want to squint your eyes a little bit as you're looking at your source photos, and it will show you where the major features of the face are, because they will look different if you're looking at it, because your eyes tend to focus on things. So if you squint a little bit and your eyes get a little bit blurry, you'll find that, like, see, I cut in here, but look where I pushed in the tool, you can still see where the eyes are, okay? Now, if I were working on this, I would have spent a lot more time getting the basic shape of the head down. I would have taken more time to make sure everything is exactly where I want it, because obviously this piece of clay is not as symmetrical as I would have liked it to start off with. So I start off there. Then I look with kind of like a blurry vision. That would give me an idea about where everything is, and then I'll start to carve those things in there about, like, how it comes in. Like, for example, if you look here, you can see the way this lines up, how the nose and the front of the bridge of the nose and the front of the upper lip are at the same level, but then the chin comes in a little bit. Okay, I may want to carve out the chin a little bit more like this, and just kind of set these basic landmarks in my clay, which I will work on refining later. I found that this is the most important part of capturing a likeness, is to just get the basic shapes down that you're going to be putting into your head sculpt. And this is going to help you so much just by focusing on these basic shapes. Once you get it there, you start working it. Now, what I will do is I'll tend to hold this thing up at different angles against my screen so that I can measure my sculpture against the silhouette of the contour line of the source photos. And that helps to give me a much more realistic approach. Now, some of the common mistakes that you will make, or at least that I did anyway, I tended to make noses too thick, and I usually didn't notice this until the sculpt was like all the way done. And I was really angry because I wasted a whole lot of time and I have to redo it. So take a look at things, and don't be afraid to put your sculpture up for a day or two, then go back and look at it again, because you will see it with fresh eyes. And don't be afraid to show it to other people. And they may not be able to capture who exactly it is without the hair and without the skin color and things, but that's fine. It's like, if anything, if they can just give you an idea whether or not things are looking more symmetrical or not, that will help you, okay? The next thing you want to do as you're working with this is plot out the pieces, the major features on the face, like the nose, the lips, the chin, the lower lip line here where it goes into the chin. The temples are like kind of like little depressions, and where the ears line up. Typically speaking, you will find that the top of the ear lines right up with the middle of the eye. Now, obviously, you can't see it on this because there's this molded hair covering it, but trust me, if you had like a sculpture with without hair or very little hair, you would see how the top of the ear lines up with that. and that will help to give you a landmark to go off of that. The other thing you want to look at as you're doing this is geometric shapes. If you look here, there's a triangle from the middle of each eye, or the end corner of each eye, to the bridge of the nose, or the bottom of the nose. If you can get these triangles, these geometric shapes correct, it greatly helps your likeness. The better the likeness, the more realistic it will come out to be. Now, one of the things you see with this is it's very smooth and doll-like. It lacks a lot of the wrinkles and detail that you'll see in some of the other sculptures that really give it that degree of realism. Okay, and this used to be good a few years back. You know, when you look at something like the Sideshow sculpt, which does look much more realistic than the Hasbro one, but again, still doesn't really capture Hayden Christensen. But when we look at the Hot Toys version, you can really see a lot of that detail come out, and it just screams at you who the actor is. And pretty much anyone who's familiar with it will be able to tell right away exactly who it is. Okay, and an important part of this is, again, if you look here, you can see the major features, the shape of the cheekbones. This line that comes down here on the face that goes into the eye socket. See, you can see where that goes. You can see the cheekbone and how it's clearly defined, but yet not too sharp. And that's a key to it, is not going overboard with things. Okay, but it's the basic shape that's going to allow you to get on here and start to refine things. Work on it a little bit. And another thing you can do as well is you can take an existing head sculpt and you can run your tools in here, and you can feel how smooth these transitions are in the features of the face. And it will give your hand some good practice in doing that on your own sculpture, so you can feel as the tool glides along the surface how you're supposed to do it in your clay. Okay, now if I skip over to some of the work that I did a few years back, like I did this one back in 2014. This was with my brother Ed, and this was a refined sculpture that I did a couple years later. Okay, this one came out much better than this one did. First of all, I got the scaling correctly. This gave him sort of a bobblehead look on the action figure. This one came out much better. Okay, also some of the detail, like, you know, the clay chipped a little bit there, and I was pulling out of the mold. But I went a little bit softer detail on the hair, made them refine, like a little bit thinner, so they came out a little bit sharper, like that. So it didn't look quite as toy-like with this one as the original one that came in. And again, this is just a couple years apart and of consistent working. I've gotten much better since then. I was just looking for something that I could compare to that would be basically the same source. But you can see some of this. Like now, another thing you can do is, it's more of an advanced thing. Once you get this in, what I like to do is I'll take a silicone-tipped sculpting tool, dip it in alcohol, and just brush everything. And it will really start to show you where there's like flat planes and things like that in your sculpture that you want to round out and smooth out. It will help to get your sculpture a much smoother and rounded and natural looking appearance. Don't be afraid if something's not looking right to put it up for a little bit and come back to it. Even if you need to change something major, you'll thank me in the end as you do that. The last thing that you can do to add some more detail, you don't want to go too heavy with thick lines because that ages your sculpt. But you can actually stipple this a little bit with a sewing needle, very sharp sewing needle, just a tiny, tiny bit into the surface, and it actually gives the skin some pore-like texture. Then you take a brush, a fine bristle brush, dipped in your alcohol, and you brush it over that, and that helps to blend that in so it doesn't look quite so sharp. And that will really help you to give your sculptures a much more realistic appearance as you do them. Then, of course, like your paint applications are important, and we're going to address that in another video coming up later about like what kind of materials you use to cast in, the difference between an opaque resin and more of a translucent resin, like a semi-clear, that will help you actually capture something that seems like the light is actually shining into it, like exhibiting some of the reflective qualities of skin. But anyway, that's about it. as far as the detail part. Uh, but start working on this. You will definitely find yourself working on these things and improving, and you'll be happy with the end product. So that's the basic idea that you want to get. There's no problem at all starting off with something like this. If you're a beginner sculptor and you can achieve something like this, that's actually not bad at all. That's actually a good thing. You'll notice, though, if you're going to be putting your figures up, your own custom figures up next to things like Hot Toys, they are going to be a little bit outmatched. But over time, you will improve. Again, the most important thing that I found helped my sculptures is that in the very beginning, I tended to sculpt too large. I made things much bigger like this is, and it lost a lot of the detail. Um, we have a tendency, at least I did, to oversize things, and you want to kind of pull that back a little bit and use your calipers. That will really help you to get an accurate measurement. These things are so important. You can pick this up off of Amazon. The prices went up. I think they're probably about $20 now, but really it's so worth it because it can really help you as you're sculpting these things out. You want to be thinking how big you're going to put the hair on. You want to think about like the dimensions is going to be and how it's going to flow. So one of the things that I'll do is when I get the initial bald sculpt done, I will take some clay and some softer clay, usually either a black or a dark gray, and I will drape out the hairlines to see how it looks dressed out with just that little suggestion of hair. But again, the main thing that you want to be shooting for is to try and get these larger details down. Sometimes it can help if you squint. You can kind of break down a little bit. You can also use your camera, and if you can maybe blur some of the features on there, it will show you where the most prominent features are on the face, and then you can accent them with the clay, and that will help you capture that basic likeness. Once you capture a basic likeness, then it's just a matter of adding detail, but not too much detail, and not softening things too much. So try to keep those things in mind. It's a fun progression, and keep whatever you do, even if you're not happy with your old sculptures, keep them because you will want to see your progression as you go along. You will want to see how much better it's getting. So that's it. You know, the big issue that we're looking at is realism in sculpture and why it's a good thing, because action figureheads are made to be easy on the eyes for you. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you found it helpful. Please like, share, and subscribe to the video if you enjoyed it, and help me out with that whole algorithm thing. And as I said, this will be a first part in a series of these that I'm going to do that will help people kind of work in from a beginner sculptor into a little bit more of an intermediate to an advanced. Not that I consider myself that advanced, but I'm getting there because I keep working at it. Anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. I'll catch you on the next one.